Welcome to Life Beyond the Ladder. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, a career strategist and midlife reinvention guide, helping you design a second act you can't wait to live. The podcast is for women who feel the pull towards something different, something more in their next chapter. We want to help you figure out exactly what that is. Be sure to subscribe if you like what you hear today. So we're going to be talking about something most high-achieving women feel, but rarely say out loud. This could happen midway through a career or really any time after. It's that strange, disorienting moment when you've worked hard, you've checked every box, you've climbed the rungs, and you have arrived. And then you look around and you think, is this it? The feeling isn't failure, and it's not even ingratitude, because we can have moments where we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, like, I have a lot, I'm fortunate, I'm being ungrateful. But that's not what it is. It's not a midlife crisis, and it doesn't mean that you made the wrong choices in your life or your career. It means your ambition is awake, and it may have been asleep for quite a while. It's asking a bigger question than life on the ladder was ever designed to ask. So that's what we're here to explore today. And I call this the arrival trap. I think by the time we're done, you're going to see that restless feeling in a completely different light. At least I hope so. So let's start at the moment. Most women know exactly what I'm talking about. You're in a meeting, for example, you've been in 100 times before, or you might be looking at your calendar on a Monday morning. You could be driving to work and you realize somewhere between the second traffic light and the third that you don't actually want to be where you're going. It's not in a dramatic way, not in a I need to quit today way, just in a brutally honest, this is not it anymore kind of way. That moment is heavy. So I want to talk to you about what to do with it, because most women I work with do one of two things when it shows up. They either push it down and keep going, or they let it turn into something that starts to cost them in big ways. You don't have to be on the verge of quitting for this topic, by the way. In fact, the earlier you do what we're going to talk about, the better. It can help you reshape the job you're in now, prepare for your next job, if you're looking for that, or prepare for retirement. This is about inflection points in our lives, like the arrival trap and how we handle them. So let me tell you about a client of mine that definitely fell into this category. You may, resonate with this quite a bit. I'm going to call her Michelle, though that's not her name. But Michelle had given, I think it was 23 years to the same organization. She built her career there. She grew her expertise. She'd been promoted, been passed over, been promoted again. She had real relationships there, real history, real roots. And then somewhere in year 21, I think it was, she started to feel it. That low-grade restlessness, that sense of like being done without quite being ready to say so. And instead of sitting with it, asking herself what it meant and what she actually wanted next, she did what a lot of us do when a relationship starts working and we haven't quite processed it yet. She started looking for reasons to go. So every conflict became evidence. Every disappointment became the proof she was looking for. A no from her manager became like confirmation, that the place was broken and the people were wrong. So Michelle started replaying old grievances in her head. She talked about it constantly to a lot of people, too many. And by the time she finally left, she didn't just walk out the door, she torched the place on her way. So she came to me after all of this had already happened. And I will never forget what she said. She said, I knew even while I was doing it that I was wrong, but I didn't know how else to leave. Sound familiar maybe? Because I said earlier, we do this in our personal relationships as well. If you think back to when you were dating somebody and you didn't want to date them anymore, you were making them bad, right? So yeah, I think about this a lot. She didn't know how else to leave. Here's what I believe happened to Michelle. She hadn't processed the breakup, because it really is what is happening when a career chapter ends, especially a long one like that. It is a breakup. And if you've ever been in a relationship and this all sounded familiar to you, you know what happens. You start zooming in on every flaw. You catalog every frustration. You manufacture the story you need to justify the exit. And you're not doing this because you're a bad person, but frankly, it's easier to leave something bad than to simply leave something that used to be good and isn't anymore. Your workplace probably isn't bad. You probably don't even need to leave it if you're feeling this pull. Okay. So this is the first thing when I work with friends, colleagues, clients, and they're facing this. We don't want to overreact. All right. Your boss probably isn't the villain you have made him or her out to be. Your colleagues probably aren't the problem. What's happening is that you have outgrown the container, and that's not a tragedy. It's actually progress. So your fatigue is real. We want to pay attention to it. Your disenchantment, it's not imaginary. Those feelings deserve to be honored, but not weaponized. So the first thing I want to say to you today is this: let's engineer a good breakup. Let's help you leave happier, still connected, with relationships intact and emotionally well. That doesn't have to mean retirement now. You may not even be anywhere close. Some of the ladies, I say like maybe 40, for sure 45 and up, face these phases where it feels like it's time to break up, with maybe even with your career. But we don't want to be reactive to that. All right. We want to be very conscious that it is a signal. All right. Doesn't mean that you have to make a decision on it right this second. But you might be leaving this job for your next job, and that could be a very healthy thing to do. You could be leaving bad boundaries in exchange for good ones. So even if you're going to stay in the same job, you're not ready to retire or move, it could be a signal that you need to redefine boundaries and renegotiate some relationships. So whatever your next chapter is, however you leave one chapter shapes how you enter the next one. And I want that to be built on a clear foundation, not on wreckage, of a war you didn't need to start. Now let's talk about why this moment feels so strange to us. We tend to think everything should feel good all of the time. And when that is disrupted for some reason, we think, okay, this is bad. I have to do something to get out of pain. But think about it. You've accomplished most, or maybe even all of what you set out to accomplish in your career. You got the title, you built the career, the income, you did the thing. And here's the cultural story that we're told. And it's too bad because that story says that when you get there, it should feel like something, like a movie moment, big, like an arrival. But for most women I talk to, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels just like a Tuesday, feels like any other day. And you got to hear this. It is just another day because your life isn't done. You haven't crossed a finish line. You've reached a landing. And landings aren't endings. They're where you catch your breath before you figure out where you're going next. So the anticlimactic feeling you might be sitting with, and this is again, whether it's at your career, at your job, could be in your personal relationships, could just be with the identity you have in your life as a whole. But that feeling that you're sitting with, it's not evidence that the whole thing was pointless, that you made wrong decisions. It's evidence that you have more capacity than this chapter required. And your system knows it all the way through. So no, this isn't all there is. And I say this to my clients all the time, and you'll hear me say it throughout this season. The time to reinvent yourself is before you retire, not after. Because right now you still have resources, time, income, you have relationships, you have influence that you won't have in quite the same way once you've stepped fully away. Have you ever known someone who retired or resigned with absolutely no plan, no purpose, no dreams to pursue? Sadly, some of them live a long time wondering why they're still here. And that breaks my heart. I know it has broken yours if you've seen it in a family member. So we don't want to be headed down that road. Right now, the mundaneness of still showing up to work every day can either frustrate you or it can give you something incredibly valuable. It can give you space to dream, space to explore, to begin something new while you still have the runway to do it. And the women who navigate this season best, they aren't the ones who waited until they had no choice but to change. They're the ones who started asking the question while they still had the luxury of time. So let me ask you something. What are you doing with that space right now? Here's the thing about ambition, and I think it gets misunderstood at this stage. A lot of women I meet are afraid that what they're feeling is the death of their drive, that the restlessness, the lack of enthusiasm, the sense of being done means something essential in them has switched off. But it hasn't. What's actually happening is that your ambition has outgrown its container. The ladder was the container. The title was a container. The structure of a corporate or a government or nonprofit career, that was all a container. And containers are useful. They give, your ambition something to climb. But eventually, if you keep growing, you outgrow them. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. So what comes next isn't the absence of ambition. It's ambition with more room to move. Ambition that gets to ask some different questions. Not how do I get to the next level, but what do I actually want to build? And what do I want to leave behind? Now, I want to be clear, your second act doesn't need to be another hamster wheel of stress and responsibility. If that's what you wanted, you wouldn't be feeling the way you're feeling right now. What we're going to explore in this show is how to design something that actually fits who you are right now, not who you were at 25 or 32 when you first started climbing. Here's what I know about this stage of life. You're not ready to disappear. You still want to do good work. You still want to contribute, and you're valuable. You still want to matter. That's totally natural. So that instinct is not something to overcome. It's just to be redirected. So I want to leave you with an image today. Think of your current career as a plane that's been in flight for a long time, and it's finally beginning its descent. For some of you, you have like 2 more states to cross, or maybe even 2 more continents. You have a long way to go. Others are on final approach. But when you start to land, you can feel a difference in the cabin. The engine sounds a little different. The altitude has shifted. You're coming into land, and you have a choice about what happens next. You can walk off the plane, collect your bags, and sit in the airport wondering what to do with zero plan. Or you can walk through a different gate, one that leads to a completely different experience, that goes where you've never been, takes you where you've always wanted to go, where you've always belonged, even if you couldn't have named it. That's a destination that you've maybe never even imagined. When you first took off all those years ago, never would have thought of it. So that's what this show is about. It's not the landing, it's the next takeoff. So I want to give you something to sit with between now and next week. If the ladder that you're on right now disappeared tomorrow, if the whole structure you've been climbing simply ceased to exist, what would you build instead? Not what would you do out of necessity, not what would be practical or safe, easy to explain to your spouse or your friends, but what would you actually build if the only constraint was who you genuinely are and what you care about? So this week, take some time. Most of you, if you're listening to this, you probably have a journal, or you have one that maybe you haven't been back to in a while. Well, get that thing out and get a pen out and write it down for yourself. Just take a few minutes, let it be messy, and let that idea be bigger than feels reasonable. And we'll work with that together this season. The arrival trap you feel is not a tragedy. It's a call to something new. I'm so glad to be here with you today, and I'm so glad you're here with us. It's just the beginning. I hope you'll like and subscribe for episode reminders, because there's so much more to come. I'm Dalisia Coppersmith, and this is your Life Beyond the Ladder. See you next week.